Hey there YouTube, this is JD, back with another game from my Isolated Queen Pawn series. As I stated, always, we're following the games from Alexander Baburin's Winning Pawn Structures. And I have another game for you guys today featuring the H4, H5 thrust, which is this attempt at breaking down the light squares here on the Kingside and using this A2, G8 and the B1, H7 diagonals for an attack. The last game we looked at was incredibly tactical, and I think the lines were really complicated. This game, I think, is a bit more straightforward. I mean, it's still got some tactical ideas, and it's still somewhat complicated, but I think that you'll have an easier time working out the variations on your own. Again, this is a Caro Kann, the Kaidanov Botvinnik attack. So there's more or less standard opening moves that we've seen before. If you remember last time, we saw Bishop B4, this time Bishop E7. Which again, pretty common move. This capture here, now the bishop comes out to D3. Last time he was forced to play Bishop D2 because of the bishop here, but this time not so. Knight C6, castles, and just Rook F1, and Rook E1, and now Bishop F6, trying to put some pressure here. Though to be honest, the pressure is kind of fake. He's not really threatening to take it at all. So, for example, after A3, which is a pretty standard idea we've seen several times, just securing the C2 and D3 squares. If black decides to get all froggy and capture this pawn, I would just take back, and he grabs here, and we just have this discovered attack with check. We're going to pick up the bishop. We've dissolved our isolated queen pawn, and the king's starting to look a little bit shaky. We're already going to be able to lift rooks. We have another bishop, knight e4. There's just all kinds of ways we're going to be able to get our pieces over there. So clearly that's not a possibility. So the pressure against d4 is there, but it's not real. So instead, he plays bishop to d7, just developing, probably going to put the bishop on c6 at some point if he can. Sometimes it drops back to e8 to guard f7. And so we just move forward, drop the queen back, trying to create that familiar battery that we've seen several times. And then rook c8, which once again is not the best move. You guys probably by now are getting the idea that you're incredibly suspicious anytime you see black playing rook to c8. The problem here, which usually it leads to just immediate defeat when they play rook c8, here the point is that white gets to play knight to e4, and he has avoided this exchange, meaning he's going to get to keep extra pieces on the board, which are going to help him attack. So this knight here on e4, it's hitting this bishop, so unless black wants to give up the bishop pair, he's going to have to drop back, which means he's lost a little bit of time. It probably honestly was better for him just to drop back and accept this trade of pieces. But so now we get queen d3, and we're already threatening to play knight to d6 and pick up the exchange here because of the threat on h7. So that induces black to play g6. And so we're starting to see some familiar aspects to this game that we saw from the last one. This queen battery here, and then having played g6, we got the rook here against e6. And we notice that he doesn't have too many defenders of this g6 square. So we're already thinking about playing ideas with this, with the h-pawn coming up the board to do this capture. He plays bishop to d2. I'm probably wondering why not bishop h6. It looks perfectly natural to do this and kick the rook over, which is going to weaken f7 a little bit. But there's a tactical problem here. We just get knight to b4, again threatening here, and notice it's uncovering the rook. So after this, after we capture here, he just takes back. We go ahead and grab the exchange, but he's hitting our queen, so he has the time to take back with the bishop. And now after queen d2, he's going to take here with a knight, and he's got the fork going on here himself. So he's going to get back all of his material, and he's won a pawn in the process. Plus, we no longer have a light squared bishop. Also, black has the bishop pair. So a pawn, the bishop pair, and a better pawn structure, probably not going to work out for white here. Which explains why he played bishop d2. Oops, we went back too far. Sorry about that. Instead of bishop h6, we get bishop to d2, which defends this b4 square, so that's no longer possible. And then it just plays queen to b6, which is going to try to target this b2 pawn. But notice that the queen coming out to b6 means that h4 is not so defended anymore. But instead, we play b4. Baburin gives this move an exclamation mark, which I'm not suggesting it's a bad move, but to me it seems a little bit obvious to be giving an exclamation mark. If we go back, he's threatening to take this b pawn, right? If we play rook ab1 to defend it, that seems kind of passive to me. And if we play bishop to b3, which just sort of blocks it, that seems kind of loose. And frankly, I don't see a lot of other good options to block the pressure here. So it seems kind of like the obvious reply to me. There's more to it, though, than just defending the pawn. He is taking control of this c5 square, which is going to be important here in a little bit. This knight's going to be able to hop in, opening this e-file and hitting this e6 square. As we saw before, whenever we're trying to run this h-pawn up the board, often we're looking at the e6 square too to try to take out the other defender of g6. And then the extra space that he's gaining here on the queen side cramps black a little bit, and we'll notice that here in a bit, black is going to start doing some toing and froing because he doesn't have a lot of room to try to maneuver. So like I said, there's more to it than just defending the pawn, but I do think that this was a touch bit of somewhat of an obvious move. So again, here we get Baburin. He's going to play rook fd8 here, and then bishop to b3. So again, lining up against this diagonal, because he realizes that perhaps the immediate one, it's going to be difficult. He's going to have to invest material to open this up. And so we get this bishop climbing back, opening up with pressure against d4. Notice we have the queen, this knight, and this rook. So if this knight were to move out of the way, he may have enough pressure to create some real problems here. So we get to rook to ac1, which Gulko, who is the white side of this, suggests that perhaps he should have played rook to d1, just further securing this pawn and making sure that there's not going to be any exchange of rooks along the c-file. But it's not so bad, and we're going to see that he's not going to get to exchange rooks anyway. So after he plays a6, and black is hoping to make something out of this b5 square. He's going to try to set something there to create some additional pressure. But now he knows there's no knight guarding h5, and his pieces are all very well placed. It's not clear he can improve any of them anymore, so we get, boom, h4. And we don't even have to go through any crazy tactical refutations of bishop takes h4. It's just simply we're just going to win a piece if he does that. So black has relatively few defenders on the king side. So this pawn thrust is going to probably be able to break down and create enough pressure that we're going to be able to break through. Black plays knight to a7, and I think he's hoping for just like h4. After h4, he might be able to play bishop to b5, and then after queen b1, he gets his rook exchange, and then we're going to have to take back with the bishop to try to keep the queen on the diagonal that we want here. White must still be better, but he's somewhat less active, and black has managed to trade a little bit of material, so this would be slightly better than what happened in the game for black. Unfortunately, that's not what Gulko had in mind. He plays knight to c5 instead of h5, which is a really nice idea. He's blocking this the c-file, meaning sure there's going to be no trades here. He's also freeing up e4 for his queen. So if we see bishop to b5 now, just queen e4, and it's pretty arguable the queen's going to be better placed on the e-file than it is on d3, because it would have options to come across to the king side, maybe to the h-file at some point, or even the g-file. And also it's hitting this sensitive spot here on e6. So I don't think that Kaidanov wants to encourage the queen to better place, so he decides that he's just going to bring his knight back. So now h5 comes, and we get queen to a7. Again, he's really kind of struggling to come up with a good idea. Here, I suppose his plan must be that he wants to play b6 to try to kick this knight out. Unfortunately for him, white doesn't really have any intentions of leaving his knight on c5 for very long. He's created this connection here, so he goes ahead and cashes that in. We get a capture, and of course he's got to take back with the h-pawn. And so we have removed one defender, and as we saw before, boom, we're going to remove the other one now. Of course, he can't even take it. Well, actually, I guess he can. He sort of has to. But after rook takes e6, we notice that g6 is basically indefensible. We're threatening to take with the rook, and we're not going to be able to take back because of the queen coming in. We'll take a look at that in a second. But he's gotten 2 pawns already for the piece, and he's probably going to get a third. The king's completely open. The black queen is stranded over here on a7, is not going to have enough time to get back to really help with the attack. Neither rook is over here to help. He just has no time. And notice that now that both the e and the f pawns are gone, this bishop is creating an indirect pin on the knight here. And so that's going to lock another piece away from really helping with the defense. He chooses to play bishop to f7 here. But after rook takes g6, and yeah, he just can't capture it. So if he plays this, then we're just going to take it, and there's mate here really quickly. He can't go to f8 because bishop is just bishop h6 just mate on the spot. So he plays king h8, but then bishop c2, threatening mate here, forces knight f6. But then after knight g5, which is threatening mate on f7, he's got to play a rook to f8 to block that. There's really no other way to do it. But this is going to cut off the king's escape route. Now he just has queen h6, king g8, bishop back, now that the knight is here and not able to come back to block because of this knight with h7. And so he's got to play rook f7, but then we just capture it and it's mate. So it's not going to work to take the rook. So we haven't even had to invest as much material as white did in the last game. Mostly because I think the pieces of blacks are a little bit more stranded this time. So instead of that, we get to see... not there. I've got to go back a little bit further. Yeah, we played this, and then he plays king to f8. So going to h8, clearly not possible. We'll just give a check, and then we'll give a check here, and it's going to be bad. So we get rook to h6. And the threat is to play rook to h8, and then after he blocks with a bishop, we'll play queen to g6. And aside from the mate threat, we're going to pick our piece back up, and we're just going to have 3 additional pawns here. So that's the threat. So he tries to run with the king. But after rook to e1, he just resigns. And the reason is pretty clear. If he tries to continue running over to the the queen side with like king d7, well then we just have queen to f5 check, and we're going to pick up this bishop at least. So it keeps running, and we take here, and we've got all of our material back, plus we got 3 pawns. But there's no way that he can stop us from taking this knight as well. The only move that he can play to stop that is to play knight b6. But after that, just bishop f4 check, meaning that the king can't go hide where it wants to, forces him back to d7, and now bishop to e6 is just checkmate. Which means he's going to go down a second piece. Not a second piece, we just reclaimed the first one. He's going down a piece, plus he's down 3 pawns, and his king's just awful. So I don't think it's anyway too early to resign. But I think this game was much more straightforward in the attack than the last one was. So if we go back and look at the situation after h5, going back a little bit further, notice none of these variations were like 10, 12 moves deep like they were last time. We get, after he played queen a7, just this capture here, and then now a much more straightforward sacrifice on e6, this time a knight instead of the rook, and he's going to follow up with the rook. And so looking here, we're looking at defenders of the g6 square. He does have one this time. It's the bishop, but it's kind of it's not a real defender. Because as we saw the mate threat that he's going to run into because of this bishop and the knight here able to quickly jump in, and this attack on the light squares. Notice that all of the mating threats were coming on one of these light squares are just too much. He doesn't have anything that can come back to defend. So notice that both of these knights, neither one can in any time very quickly go to influence any of the squares here. I mean, this one could technically defend g6, but he'd just be giving himself up. This one's blocked out by the bishop. They don't have any route to get back to help with the defense. This one could come back to f6, but we just capture it with check thanks to this bishop here. So he just has no defenders. And when you're in a situation where there's no defenders, clearly you're going to get overrun here. So just after the bishop here, we grab this guy, and it's really lights out at this point. He's able to create too many threats, and there's too many loose pieces in black's camp. And I think that this queen over here on a7 really just hurts him. I mean, if this queen were maybe here or somewhere over here, this might be a much different situation than it is. But as it is, he's able to create really simple, straightforward, direct threats. You don't have to go through 10 moves of calculation this time. You can just kind of see what the immediate threats are, but they're just too much for black to handle. So again, I think another really fantastic and probably more user-friendly version of this H-file shove, along with some sort of a sacrifice on e6 to weaken these two key diagonals, b1 through h7 and then a2 through g8. So I hope you guys found this game as instructive as I did. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoy it when you guys like these videos. I enjoy it even more when you comment and subscribe. So make sure you do that, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.